Okay, so today we're diving into a source that's pretty unique, definitely controversial. It's called The Drug User's Bible, Extended Edition by Dominic Milton Trott.
Right. And it's not your usual kind of book. It's actually offered free explicitly for public safety reasons.
Yeah, and it calls itself an antidote to the war on drugs. Bold claim.
Very. The whole idea is giving people information, harm reduction, managing risks, personal safety, all around psychoactive substances.
So our mission here is to unpack what's inside, the surprising facts, the author's own experiences, which are pretty varied, and the sort of wider social context. Hopefully you walk away a bit better informed on, well, a really complex topic.
And right off the bat, the book lays down this core philosophy. It's summed up as ignorance kills, education saves lives.
That's pretty direct.
It is. It really pushes the idea that understanding this stuff is what prevents tragedy, prevents death. It's less about demonizing the drug itself and more about knowledge being the key to safety.
Which is quite a different angle than you usually hear.
Completely. It frames knowledge itself as the safety mechanism.
So if that's the big principle, ignorance kills, education saves lives.
Huh.
How does the book actually, translate that into practical advice? Like, what are the concrete harm reduction steps?
Well, one of the big ones right up front is substance testing.
Okay.
It talks about using third-party services. Places like WikiNose, drugsdata.org, Energy Control International, they offer free, anonymous lab testing.
Wow, free and anonymous. That's significant.
It really is. It helps people know what they actually have,
Yeah.
but it also talks about stuff you can do yourself more accessibly.
Right, like those reagent kits you hear about. What are they exactly?
Exactly. Reagent kits like Marquis, Frode. Basically, they're simple chemicals. You put a tiny sample of the substance with the reagent and it changes color.
And the color tells you something.
Yeah, it indicates what might be present. So for MDMA, say it should go purple, black, or black with those specific reagents. It's very hands-on, practical safety advice.
And it doesn't stop at just identifying it, does it?
Yes.
Does it talk about safer ways to actually use substances?
Oh, absolutely. It gets into really specific details. Like if someone's insufflating, snorting, it talks about nasal care.
Right.
Importance of sterile equipment, always. And a big warning about not crushing pills because they have all these fillers, binding agents, that kind of thing. Not good for your nasal passages.
Yeah. Meticulous about the whole process.
Yeah.
Preparation, aftercare.
Very much so.
And I found it interesting how the book stresses looking at the drug's whole picture.
Yeah.
It's not just about the high, is it?
No, not at all. That's a key point. You need to consider the full experience. The gentler dip with a much longer tail, as he puts it, or maybe a deep initial hangover, or even sometimes a lengthy period of contentment.
It's the whole arch.
Exactly. He uses the example of an alcohol binge, how the recovery can take days. It really drives home that the effects, the real effects, last way longer than just the peak feeling. It makes you think about use in a much broader time frame.
Okay, that makes sense. So with that kind of framework, let's get into some of the specific experiences the author shares. Starting with chemicals. Microdosing, psychedelics, that's everywhere now, seems like. How's it described in the book?
Yeah, it's definitely topical. The book defines it as, sub-threshold doses. We're talking tiny amounts, like 10 micrograms of LSD, maybe 0.2, 0.3 grams of psilocybin mushrooms.
Sub-threshold meaning you don't fully trip.
Right. You shouldn't have overt psychedelic effects. The claimed benefits are things like better perception, more creativity, maybe less anxiety, more motivation, sharper focus, better mood. It's quite a list.
And the author's own experience?
He described it as feeling a little livelier and a tiny bit more alive. Senses just working a bit better. It wasn't like world-changing, but a noticeable, subtle enhancement.
Interesting. Kind of challenges the all-or-nothing view of drug effects.
Exactly. It suggests even these tiny doses might have some potential we're just starting to explore.
Okay, from the subtle to the, well, extremely common caffeine. The book argues it's actually shaped civilization.
Yeah, it really does. It calls caffeine a benign excitation, but it highlights how it's fostered rituals, social bonding, think coffee shops, tea ceremonies, and just sustained productivity, especially, in modern work life.
Huh. Never really thought of it quite like that. Any safety notes on something so everyday?
Surprisingly, yes. It mentions a potentially lethal dose 150 to 200 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, or about 5 to 10 grams total.
Whoa. How much is that in, like, cups of coffee?
Well, for an average adult, that's maybe 50 to 100 cups of coffee in a short time, so highly unlikely for most people, but it's a reminder, isn't it? Even common things have limits.
Good point. It also mentions related things like guayusa, yerba mate.
Right, other caffeine-containing plants. Guayusa, guarana, green tea, yerba mate, cacao, part of the same family of effects, really.
Okay, so caffeine's one thing. Let's move to more potent stimulants where things get trickier. The double-edged sword idea, the author's pretty candid about cocaine. What stands out there?
He shares some quite specific anecdotes. One surprising one was mixing it with alcohol, which he felt actually lessened the hangover the next day, which seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, usually makes it worse, doesn't it?
Usually.
Yeah.
He also talks about crack cocaine in an Amsterdam commune, described the high as short, albeit not mind-blowing, and then later trying Peruvian flake by snorting it. That experience led him to actually just discard the rest. He
Right.
basically recognized the risks, the path it could lead down, and decided, not to go there. Self-preservation.
And then there's methamphetamine. He says that one invoked the most intense cravings and was the hardest to resist going too far with. Sounds like a really difficult one for him.
It really does. He uses this term, poisoned chalice. The idea that the high it promises is maybe unachievable, and chasing it can make normal life, even normal sexual activity, seem unfulfilling, which of course just accelerates addiction.
Wow.
Yeah, and he quotes thefix.com describing the brutal crash and bottomless depression afterwards. It's a very stark warning coming from his personal experience.
The book also mentions research chemicals. These
Okay.
are the designer drugs, right? Things like hexane, IPPH, NM2AI.
Exactly. Stuff designed to mimic existing drugs, often to get around laws, but with really unpredictable effects and safety profiles.
What does he say about them?
He lists typical dosages, but the main takeaway is the risk. IPPH, for instance, got banned in the UK back in 2015. With NM2AI, he mentions alarming reports about addiction, blackouts. It made him choose a really low dose when he tried it himself.
So, extreme caution needed.
Absolutely, if not just avoiding them altogether, given the unknowns.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Sedatives and dissociatives. Diazepam Valium. That's super common, widely prescribed. What was his experience?
Well, despite it being common for anxiety, he found it mostly just made him drowsy. It didn't really tackle the anxiety itself for him.
Oh,
And he noted that when he tried it again later without tolerance, even 15 milligram felt that intense. Shows how potent prescription meds can be, especially if you're not used to them.
right. Then there's MDA. It's often compared to MDMA, right?
Yeah.
But different.
Yeah, he describes it as more variable, more stimulating, and with a stronger psychedelic edge than MDMA.
In his experience.
He talks about redosing and then feeling flying, hot, sweaty, euphoric, and struggling to stay functional.
Sounds intense.
Very. And it led him to a key realization. Redosing was not a sensible move, particularly on a first-time experiment. That's classic harm reduction advice right there. Know your limits, especially with new things.
Definitely. That one of the strongest warnings seems to be about artificial cannabinoids.
Yeah.
He called the experience traumatic and terrifying.
Yeah, that one really stands out. He links these substances directly to the surge of addiction amongst the homeless in British cities around 2017.
That's a heavy statement.
It is. And based on his own bad experience, he vowed never to touch them again. It's a powerful counterpoint to them sometimes being marketed as safe or legal alternatives. Clearly, they can be incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so that covers a range of chemicals. Let's move on to botanicals, the natural sources. The book mentions Terence McKenna as a big influence. Why him?
McKenna's work, his lectures and books, really shaped the author's perspective on hallucinogenic plants. McKenna saw them not just as drugs, but as potentially having huge value for medicine, maybe even for humanity's future.
Kind of elevating them beyond just recreational use?
Exactly, seeing them as tools for insight, for exploration.
Which seems to lead into the experience with ayahuasca. That sounds like it's really profound for the author.
Oh, massively. He describes being able to look at really painful personal issues, but from a distance, like a third-party perspective, without the usual fear, anger, or negativity, just observation.
Wow.
And feeling this overwhelming sense of love for everything and everyone. He describes it as bringing healing, perspective, tolerance, wisdom, and importantly, effects that lasted for weeks, even months afterwards.
So genuinely life-changing, it sounds like.
It really comes across that way. A powerful example of how these experiences in the right context can be deeply therapeutic.
And it's not just about ingesting things, is it? The book talks about non-drug hallucinogenic states, too.
Right. Right, which is fascinating. He mentions Shirodhara, that's an ancient Ayurvedic practice where warm oil is streamed onto your forehead.
Okay.
And he describes that as a powerful psychedelic experience. Said he encountered a friendly, benign other intelligence, felt connected through a lens of compassion.
Just from oil on the forehead.
Apparently so. But then, interestingly, he contrasts that with trying a sensory deprivation tank, which he found pretty unexciting.
Huh. So it really varies.
Hugely. Shows the mind's potential is vast and maybe unpredictable, even without substances.
Let's touch on some other botanicals mentioned. Betel nut, used a lot in Asia.
Yeah, traditionally chewed in many Asian and oceanic countries. He tried it in Mandalay, Myanmar, experienced quick, mild effects, a bit of stimulation, feeling good. Though long-term use has known risks, especially for oral cancer.
Okay, what about wormwood, the absinthe connection?
Right, famous for absinthe. It's also reported to induce lucid dreaming. The author felt a kind of pervasive sort of influence, had vivid dreams.
But there's a catch.
Big catch. He warns about the tujone, that's the active compound. It's toxic to the brain, kidneys, liver, so serious risks involved there.
Good to know. Blue lotus, ancient Egypt connection.
Yeah, historically significant. He found drinking it as tea was calming, sedating. Smoking it gave a more noticeable relaxation, anxiety relief without a hangover. Seems like a gentler one.
Okay, now for the opposite end of the spectrum, nutmeg. The book basically says absolutely not. Why?
He classifies it as a deliriant, which is different from a psychedelic, more confusion, less structured hallucination, often unpleasant. His experience was just horrible.
How so?
Nausea, dizziness, confusion, really bad head pain. He was sick for days, apparently had to literally crawl to the bathroom. It's a really stark warning. Natural doesn't automatically mean safe or pleasant. Far from it in this case.
Definitely noted. Okay, kratom. This one's really controversial. Used for opioid withdrawal, alcohol dependence, but facing bans.
Exactly. The book details its use as an aid for people trying to get off opioids or cut down on alcohol. And the author expresses real frustration about efforts to ban it, like the UK's Psychoactive Substances Act in 2016.
Why frustrated?
He sees it as authorities openly undermining a potential recovery route. His own experience was positive, helped with stress and pain, but he's careful to add the warning. Don't just swap one addiction for another. It can be dependency forming itself.
So complex. Potential benefits, potential risks, and a political battleground.
Pretty much sums it up.
And finally in this category, Thuoc Lao, Vietnamese tobacco.
Yeah, this was another negative one for him. He tried it and felt completely overwhelmed, physically sick, vowed never again. Just shows how potent even seemingly normal substances from other cultures can be.
Right. Okay, let's zoom out a bit to the broader landscape. Addiction and recovery. What's the book's message there?
It acknowledges that, yes, repeated drug use changes the brain, affects self-control. That's the reality of addiction. But the core message is one of hope. Treatment can work, and people recover from addiction every day.
That's important to hear.
Yeah, it compares addiction to managing other chronic illnesses. And it mentions detox, getting relief from withdrawal. It really tries to counter the stigma and emphasize that recovery is possible.
And on a related note, overdose awareness. Crucial information. What are the key takeaways?
Stay calm. That's number one. Call emergency services immediately. Give them info, age, weight, height if you know it.
And things not to do.
Critical don'ts. Don't just leave someone to sleep it off. Don't try to make them vomit. These can be fatal mistakes. It also lists symptoms for stimulant overdose chest pains, seizures, rapid heartbeat, confusion stuff that's vital to recognize.
Life-saving information, potentially. The book also mentions the lawscape. Why is that important?
Because drug laws vary wildly across the world. If you're traveling drug tourism, as it's sometimes called, you absolutely need to check local laws. Ignorance isn't a defense.
Legal risks are real risks.
Exactly. Getting arrested in another country is a harm you want to reduce. Right? It mentions the U.S. drug schedules, like Valium being Schedule 4, just as an example of how things are classified. It's another layer of safety on the legal context.
What about dealers? The book has a specific take on them.
Yeah, it points out that dealers are often just a link in a chain. They might not actually know for sure how pure or safe their product is.
So you can't rely on them for accurate info.
Pretty much. The advice is blunt. Never make assumptions. Which loops back to why personal testing and knowledge are so important for safety.
Makes sense. Now, this section on media and public perception, that gets pretty interesting. There's a controversial forum post mentioned.
Yes, it presents this viewpoint that argues against just demonizing, say, heroin users. It even extends compassion to convicted traffickers like the Bali Nine.
That's definitely controversial. What's the argument?
The argument presented is that media and politicians often have other agendas maintaining power, moralizing that overwrite human rights concerns in these situations. It really pushes back against the simple, sniveling junkie stereotype.
And the book proposes a sort of code of ethics for reporting on drugs.
It does. 5 main points. Things like frame tragedies as resulting from erroneous use, basically. Lack of safety knowledge rather than just drugs are bad.
Okay.
Avoid generic drugs talk, be specific. Address cultural bias, like how we talk about alcohol versus other substances. Challenge loaded terms like drink versus abuse or sell versus push.
Yeah.
Promote harm reduction education. And question those inflated police drug seizure values you often see.
That sounds like a call for much more nuanced reporting. Why would that be hard for media or politicians to adopt?
Well, it challenges established narratives, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Sensationalism often sells better, and simplistic war on drugs narratives can be politically useful even if they don't reflect reality or help public health.
True. Finally, the book touches on Amsterdam as a destination. How's it portrayed?
As a place for discerning and adventurous tourists, known for its coffee shops, obviously, and a more tolerant attitude generally.
So highlighting places for cannabis, psychedelics.
Yeah, it mentions things like the Cannabis College, art galleries where you might take a museum dose of psychedelics, parks like Vondel Park for relaxing. It paints it as a city where informed choice and a more open approach are, well, more normalized.
Okay. Wow. We've covered a lot of ground here, pulling back from this deep dive into the drug user's Bible. It's definitely a complex landscape.
It really is. We've gone from the nitty-gritty of chemical and botanical experiences through harm reduction strategies, legal issues, societal views. It's a lot.
What really strikes me is how the book constantly challenges the usual ways of thinking about this stuff, puts informed choice, safety right at the center.
Exactly. And it does that while sharing these incredibly personal, sometimes really intense, subjective experiences with drugs, without drugs. It covers a huge range.
So, for you listening, what's the takeaway? I guess it means understanding this whole area is way more complicated than just headlines or, simple assumptions.
Yeah. It highlights how crucial knowledge critical thinking really are. For navigating a world with all these substances, yes, but also just for understanding different perspectives. It's about safety, sure, but also about a more maybe nuanced way of looking at society.
Which leads to maybe a final thought, this principle, ignorance kills, education saves lives. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? In this age of just information overload, so many biases floating around, how could we apply that idea to other complex topics, other taboos? How do you get past our own biases to really understand things?
That's a really good question. How do we move beyond the easy answers?
Something to ponder, definitely. We hope you'll keep thinking about it as you continue your own journey of discovery.